Hello and welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television International. Today being the 10th of July 2023, another day to make it right where you didn't get it right during the weekend or for the past 6 months. The program is a daily, just like I told you, and we have quite a number of stories that we'd love to keep you informed about on the papers. And so we'll beg your indulgence to drop your comment on Facebook and on YouTube, and then we'll take it live here on the show. I am Stella Elisha Dasherman. Of course, I'll be doing this with Rachel Tenzi. Good morning.
Morning, Stella.
How was the weekend?
It was fine. How was yours?
Mine was hectic, actually, because I was on the farm during the weekend. So I'm actually having some body things, but I thank God for that.
Weekend.
Yeah. All right. So let's go straight into the paper, starting with the Daily Times newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, Nwora is chairman editorial board ombudsman Daily Times of Nigeria. The big story on the paper, resurgence of killings nationwide tops National Assembly agenda this week. The writer following the story, security chiefs face tough screening. Some ministerial nominees fail routine clearance. You can start with the details on the front page and inside the paper. We know military personnel involved in illegal oil bunkering coming from Niger Delta Group, Bags do Kubo. Still on the paper, why foreign airlines dread operating within Nigeria. We have a writer that says IGR jobs affected, and I believe is still on the backdrop that we are talking about concerning the trap funds that these international airlines are having in Nigeria. And you can find more of the investigation on the front page and continue inside the paper. And at the downside of the paper, we have slow implementation of fiscal act affecting public resource handling in states coming from commission chair. You can find the details on page 2, and that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
And on the Voice of Liberty, which is the next paper we will be looking at, we have insecurity. Castina recruits 2,400 youths to secure communities. And on Plateau killings, Governor reimposed 24-hour curfew in Mango local government area. Court orders Obasanjo, Yar'Adua, Jonathan Buhari government to account for the $5 billion Abacha loot. The big story for the Voice of Liberty, we have President Tinubu emerges as the new ECOWAS chairman. With the writer here, okay, not the writer, a little detail of the story that say President Bola Tinubu has emerged as the new chairman of the Economic Community of West African State at the 63rd ordinary session of the Authority of Heads of State and Government yesterday in Guinea-Bissau. So you can find detail of the story inside the paper. Coming from the ICPC, no fight implicating Tinubu in our possession. You can find detail of the story inside the paper. Nigeria's peace guaranteed with Musa as the new defense chief. This is coming from Irabo. And also we have coming from the ex-Zamfara governor, Yari regained freedom from DSS. And then on the cost of governance is quiet over near 2,600 aides for Opabio, Abbas and lawmakers saying 12 billion naira spent on National Assembly appointees. And I think it's important we talk about insecurity, Rachel, even though at a point it looks like we're sounding like broken record, or so to say, but then we have to keep re-emphasizing the issue of insecurity. And I'm happy, like the first paper we took, that the National Assembly are actually looking at making it, you know, the top agenda this week. And it's, of course, it is something that we really need to give it so much attention. If you recall, when we were talking about some of the policy the president placed, especially looking at our economy, how we can, you know, remove some of the tax, about 5% tax that was being removed, and then just so that, you know, businesses, manufacturers can have an enabling environment. You remember I said that we cannot talk about an enabling environment if we don't do something about insecurity, because, of course, if some of the policies being said are favorable and then the environment is not favorable, of course, investors won't come into the country.
They won't.
Of course, a lot of things won't go right. And it's really disheartening because looking at the insecurity, pockets of killing here, left, right, and center. Of course, we're seeing on the paper we had an issue in Castina where we see the government is planning on recruiting youths. And I think this is the right step in the right direction because, of course, some of these youth knew some of the roots, and I think they should have the backing of the government from the state level down to local government areas. We've had issues of course where vigilantes are being killed, but that won't stop us from actually doing something as a country. But then take a looking at Plateau State, the issue of the killing in Mangu is becoming unbecoming. I really do not know what the problem is. I really do not know because there was a curfew that was set there. There were security agencies that were set there, and yet we are seeing that killing is still ongoing. When you're on your way coming, you see youth, you see people moving around trying to leave Mangu to another place. And this is how people keep leaving their ancestral ground or their land for other people, foreigners, to occupy. And I just hope that beyond the curfew, what else can be done? Because we've heard that even in the midst of curfew, attack is still ongoing in places. So we saw that in Taraba where 24 hours curfew was also set. But then beyond those curfew, what else can be done about this? I'm happy looking at some of the people that have been said, and then looking at the fact that promises coming from the government, security agents saying there'll be no rest for people who decide to cause chaos. So I just hope that more steps will be put in place. If we know where these people are, let us do the right thing, actually, doing away with them. You remember where I said the issue of negotiation, we have nothing to negotiate with bandits, because I do not think we have anything that they want in our possession. Even though there was a time they said that the government knew what they want. I remember the issue of Kaduna State. They said the government knew what they want. And I asked, what deal do you have with the government? They have nothing that you want. So we hope something will be done to actually address the issue of insecurity in the country.
Of course, Sele, I believe that until the government and the security agencies come to agree that there is a big gap, a very, very wide gap that needs to be filled in, we will never have a significant amount of security in our local communities and our villages. Because when you look at places, for example, that have been able to gain some amount of sleep in the past years, that they have witnessed hundreds of attacks and their areas were no-go, and they also had unknown gunmen coming to them, Fulani herdsmen, bandits, and all of that. Areas, for example, on the plateau like Birkin-Ladi, when you go down to the Fan area and all of that, you realize that for those areas and for those people in that community to be able to sleep now, Sele, youth woke up in that community. And why I'm bringing us to this area is because the government and our security agencies need to understand that there is a gap from them. We have situations where witnesses will say the security operatives did not do anything at checkpoints because they say this is their jurisdiction, therefore they haven't gotten any order to move into another jurisdiction. We talked about that here so many times, and some of the laxity that we are seeing that is not supposed to be there. Then what is the government supposed to do? Long before now, we're supposed to take community policing seriously, Sele, until the government gets to the point where they are capable enough to protect the lives of people, because we are seeing that gap, Sele. We as people living in the community, I keep saying it, just because you feel you are in the metropolitan area and you feel it's safer there, a lot of people have been caught up with insecurity on their way out to another state and all of that. So nobody is actually safe. So when we see the security chiefs on the paper last week saying something like security is becoming better and there is a downturn in the number of killing, I said, no, it's too early for that kind of gloating now. Like, let's wait until we have years and years counting in Nigeria that people who no community have been raised down by fire, by bandits and all of that, and before we can really brag about that. So yes, I'm looking forward to the government and the agency agreeing that there is a gap somewhere that needs to be filled by the community and the youth, and then you lines with them and come out with measures and like resources and strategies on how this is what you are going to do for your community, because you know these routes better. The same way we keep saying that these bandits know the road more than us because they move on the leg, they know their howdowns better. I believe youths also in this community knows this area very well. So it's high time for all hands to be on deck, and the government needs to step in and see how it's not only for Katsina to think that, okay, let's bring our youth into this. It's for every state in Nigeria that is going through one community attack or another, that you need to make use of what is available for you until the government itself is able to fill in those gaps, because we are seeing the wide gap, and is one of the reasons why we have so many communities not being able to sleep at night.
Really, so I just hope something is being done about it, because there is no state in Nigeria right now that you can actually say it's safe.
It's safe.
See that we're working with the IPOB, we're working with bandits, we're working with kidnappers, and the names just keep getting the way.
Yes.
We want to get different names with the same operation. We hope something will be done about that. And I think that's all on the Voice of Liberty.
On the Matrix newspaper, why a supported Tinubu walked against Atiku, a statement coming from Fayose. Tinubu's surprising performance vindicates supporters of Muslim ticket. A statement coming from El-Rufai. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 4. And on devaluation, Nigerians may spend 763 billion naira on foreign education. Still on the paper, Lucas Hernandez moved from Bayern Munich to PSG on a 5-year deal. For our sport lovers, you can find the details of this transfer deal on page 19. Outrage over ban on Nigerians by Sicilies and others. Which country will ban Nigeria next? This is a statement coming from Nigerians, and I believe that a lot of us are not happy about this ban because of the japa that is currently happening in the country. You can find the details on the front page and continue on page 4. The big story on the Matrix newspaper, as new ECOWAS chairman Tinubu spells out his action plan. The writer of the story says, "We will not accept coup in West Africa again." Prioritizes political stability, peace and security in the region. Calls for improved private sector participation to drive. Still on the Matrix newspaper, over 5.9 million electricity customers overbilled by Discos via estimation, with only 47% meter in the first quarter of 2023. A report, you can find the details on page 19. APC shifts National Caucus next meeting by 1 week. Suspension of tax increment averted threat to manufacturers. Statement coming from MAN. You can find the details on page 15. And at the downside of the paper, FRC laments slow implementation of Fiscal Responsibility Act in states. We have a picture story that shows Tinubu, the new chairman of ECOWAS, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, thanking regional leaders for electing him ECOWAS chair in Guinea-Bissau yesterday. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
And a New Telegraph newspaper, which is the next paper, the first quarter of 2023, 12 banks spent 179.17 billion naira on personnel. You can find detail of the story on the front page and more inside the paper. Airlines trap for Nigeria and Ethiopia to swap $100 million. You can find that story on page 8. Still on New Telegraph newspaper, Tinubu's rejection of EU's report rules out chances of electoral reform, coming from the PDP presidential candidate Atiku. Akpabio emerges doubts religious tension, coming from a reverend, and it has the writer say it calls for service Senate president. You can find more on page 25. Coming from Yari, we will execute our mandate to the letter. Coming from the DSS, the ex-governor's summon release not connected with Tinubu's call. And on misconduct, PSC approved 3 ASP dismissal. You can find detail of that story on page 4. The big story say attrition rate in military worrisome, says retired general. One Nigeria creating security problem in different ways, seek extension of service years. You can find more on page 2. Coming from Ipman, pipeline vandalism, oil theft can disrupt fuel supply in Lagos and in the southwest. You can find more on page 4. Nigerians and others kept $2.4 trillion in Swiss bank in 2022. That is a report. You can read more of that report on page 4. Account for the $5 billion Abacha loot, court orders Obasanjo, Yar'Adua, Jonathan and Buhari's government. Asked Tinubu to discover some, Sarah Bright President to implement judgment. You can find that story on page 3. And still we have on this paper again, Tinubu is the new ECOWAS chairman, seek regional action against terrorism, coup d'etat to convey extraordinary meeting October. You can find more of that story on page 2. We have a study that links poor oral health to memory issues. So for those who find it surprising, you read more of that story on page 28. And I think most of the papers keep talking about the Abacha loot, about
Yes.
$5 billion, you know. And I remember vividly, especially the fresh one I still on our memory is the passing, just the former President Buhari, the money that kept coming into the country, and then they kept saying that the money would be used for infrastructure, would be used for, you know, give to people, the vulnerable, and all of that. And we recall, we kept saying, for those who have benefits, you please call on the show so it doesn't look like the government is actually lying, so we can actually applaud. And personally, I've not met anyone who said he or she has benefited. I do not know about other people, and I am not saying that the government was lying. But you know, when we're talking about transparency and accountability, it is proper that beyond just the paper, that we have individuals that can come out and actually say yes, or we can actually see infrastructures that were being made using that same money. And then it keeps telling us that with this money that kept coming into the country, and then we kept borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. What actually did we use that money for? And no wonder the court is asking the government from Obasanjo time till Buhari to actually give an account for that money that kept coming into the country, because of course people can really not tell what that money was used eventually. So we hope to see that more follow-up will be, and then we'll see what actually the government, the past administrations have done with that money that was brought into the country.
So like if we will sit down and make a list of the money that haven't been accounted for in this country by past administration, we're not just talking about the past Buhari's administration, but by administrations before him, then we'll realize that we haven't been having a transparent and accountable democracy in this country, because we have so many. We can even leave the Abacha loot aside and talk about the whistleblowing money that were recovered, because I remember it was serious. That was one of the major things the Buhari's administration started, and we had a lot of whistleblowers, and there were billions of naira recovered due to that, and still we didn't have any report concerning what was done about that. And we are also looking at this also, and there is so much, Sally, and we will not stop demanding and requesting for transparency and accountability, because just as we have our duties as citizens of Nigeria, we also have our rights also, and so does the government have their duties to perform towards us, and one of which is accountability, because whatever fund was looted by Abacha, this is still the government's money, and when it's being brought down, it's not meant to be a silent expenditure. Nigerians need to know, where did this fund go to, and what is the result of the expenditure as a result of this money? So say that every time we see what's going on the paper and a lot of money that can't be accounted for, we just realize that we need to keep demanding transparency from our government, because we need to know, and we should kick away this national cake thing. It's not, it's you and I's money. We keep talking about how our taxes accumulate to all of this income. We keep talking about the bills we pay. We keep talking about everything that is being deducted from you, directly or indirectly. These are all what the government used to generate revenue and all of that. And when this money has now relocated back to the government again, let's not sit down and think it is just for the government to decide what happens to it, but that they need to be transparent and then account for every kobo that is being spent in the country.
Rachel, what I see vividly is corruption eating deep into this country, when we do not have administration, government coming out to account. It makes it look as if they are not accountable to anyone. But I think it's high time we have a government that realize that you are accountable to the people, because you have to remember that every penny you spend, we're talking about taxpayers' money.
Yes.
So it is only proper that you account for that money, because if you do not give account of it, that is where corruption. I always talk about many people who have served this country and then they have to give a bribe for them to be able to get their money back. These are things that is happening.
Yes.
I know of someone who just retired and then he can't even access his pension. Why? Because the person who is actually working on the file, the committee that has been set up for clearance, is saying you have to give me 500,000 naira before I can give you your money. And then just imagine if this person, maybe possibly it's just 1.5 million naira that you're going to earn, and you're giving 500,000 away. I'm going to talk about people who have been in service or who have retired for the past 10 years and then they are yet to get their gratuity. So a lot of things are not working well in this country. And I think that it's high time the government, our leaders realize that you are accountable to the people you lead. And then when we're able to fish out people who are behind all of this corruption that is going on, we'll see that it won't be a problem for you to tell us that, yes, okay, this $5 billion that we got from a Loot, this is what we use the money for. This is where this money went to. I'm going to talk about people who have even eaten a lot of our fund in the name of fuel subsidy. And, you know, question will be, how sure are we that we have stopped paying fuel subsidy?
Yes.
How sure are we that it's not just a hike in fuel price? So these are questions that, you know, when you see things not going well, it begins to give ideas to Nigerians to say, what if this is this? So we hope that the administration, from the Obasanjo down to the Buhari administration, will give us account of what they use this $5 billion for eventually.
Yes.
Well, and I think that is all on the New Telegraph newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, Prince Dr. Samuel Abiyemi, 1968 to 2023. Family of late News Direct publisher announces burial right, expresses gratitude for messages received. You can find the details on page 22. The big story on the paper, Abacha loot. Pressure mounts on federal government to reveal expenditure, total amount looted. The writer following the story, comply with court judgment, prove you are different from Buhari setup, tells Tinubu. Hold Obasanjo Yar'Adua Jonathan Buhari accountable. Statement coming from Falana. You can find the details on page 2. Still on Nigerian News Direct, Sanwo-Olu charges civil servants to recommit to efficient service delivery. Over 5.9 million electricity customers billed inaccurately by Discos. This is a report. We have no file implicating President Tinubu and associates. A statement coming from ICPC. Abiente lawmakers with different, coming from Speaker Abbas. You can find the details on page 21, and that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
Right on the Guardian newspaper, starting from the ministerial list, 5 ex-governors, technocrat-led Tinubu's 42-man cabinet. We remember last week where we saw the presidency coming out to say that the list is not yet ready. And we're seeing that it's over 40 days now the president have been on seat. So it's expected that in the first 60 days, he should be able to bring out his ministerial list. But then looking at some of the papers and some of the report that came in during the weekend, they said the list is presently with the DSS. So they are going through it to be sure of people who actually qualify for it. And, you know, people have come out to give suggestions that we should have about 60% of those who are into, talking about digital, and then also 40% of politicians. We have women coming out to say the president should not forget his promise to the youth and to women that he will, have women in administration. Excuse me. So you will see that a lot of people are expecting a lot from the president. And of course, I know he cannot please anybody. But if you recall, Rachel, we kept saying that concerning this ministerial list, we need people who are capable, we need people who are transparent. And I just hope that the DSS will be fair and just in checking this list. We do not want to hear somebody who actually, let's say for instance, the former governor that is still having some scorpion and some skeleton in his locker, and then we'll have him come into the minister. Because we've had over the years some ministers that are just ministers to their state and not ministers to the country, because they are only loyal to their state and not loyal to the country. You remember the past ministers that we had. I kept asking, why didn't you complain while in office? You had to wait for 8 years to say that you were unable to, you know, give the power to do the right thing, or because based on we have people who are medical doctors and then we're leading as Minister of Labor, or we had people who engineers and then we're giving Minister of Education. You begin to see that something seems not to be right. So we hope that this ministerial list will actually be people who really know the work that is actually waiting for them. And we hope we will not hear some excuses whatsoever coming from our minister. So we wish the DSS all the best. The list will be submitted to the House of Assembly after all is being done. So we hope, because people are saying, making a comparison to the former president, that he actually had his ministers after 6 months, which was way out of time. So we hope that the president will be able to come up with his list on time, and then we'll have the ministers doing the right thing, and then we'll be able to applaud them for a well-done job at the end of the day.
And I think, Sele, the bottom line is we want competent people in position. That's all what matters to us. Yes, we want the youth represented, we want women represented, but you know, let the youth that are being put there to be competent. We want the women that will be given any ministerial office to be competent, and so also for the men that will be put in the office to be competent. And we will be here, Sele, to be questioning these ministers. We will know if you're in the education system, and we are waiting to see, because we will be here watching 1 year later, 2 years later, what are the projects you're doing, and we will start demanding you to work, because we need result-driven people to take Nigeria to the next level. It's all about consistency. It's not about giant steps. It's not about heavy rainfall. It's just those tiny drops consistently falling that will make an impact and then a difference. And we will be watching, and then we will call, because we are here to be the voice to everybody, and we will ask, what have you done in this pool? We will not wait for anybody to come 4 years later and say, no, I was not being put in the right position. We should be able to feel your impact 6 months in your office, 1 year later in your office, 2 years later. We should be able to feel your impact if you are out there doing your job, and we're not going to sit and wait and watch people do nothing and later lament when you've just wasted 8 years of Nigerians' time and people under that office that needed to feel the impact of you being there.
No, Rachel, 100 days is enough for us to know if we are actually doing the right thing. After 100 days, if that is enough to say what you are planning to do for a year. Because Nigerians are smart and wiser. They no longer wait for a year, 2 or even 4 years. Because with the way hardship is actually eating the country, believe you me that with the way things are biting hard, Nigerians are really ready to hold everybody accountable. So we hope them all the best as they check the ministerial list. Still on the Guardian newspaper, we have other stories here. Tinubu emerges ECOWAS chairman, commits to democracy in the sub-region. You can find detail of that story on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. Also, we have Akpan hired to destabilize the southeast, frustrate Kanu's release to enrich self, says Ohanize. You can find more of that story on page 7. Terrorists killed 231 persons in Mangu Council. This really a sad one. You can find detail of the story inside the paper. Also, we have some few picture stories actually showing the president and some former governors, possibly, who might actually be part of those he is actually thinking, or they're actually trying to check their portfolio to see if they have actually stand a chance to be ministers. We also have another column down where we can see the governor of Lagos State, and then we have a story that says Dangote congratulates the Guardian publisher on the 40th anniversary. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper. But before we continue with the paper analysis, we'd love to take a break at this moment so you can chew the stories. Now, when we come back from the break, we'll open the phone lines and hear what your thoughts are concerning any story that is of interest to you. Please stay tuned. We will be right back.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies on Echo Television International, your winning station, and I have to apologize because today on the show we will be unable to actually take your phone calls. So you can drop your comment on Facebook, whatever your thoughts are concerning any of the stories, you can drop it on our Facebook and YouTube, which is at Echo Television International, and then we'll do well to actually digest it and also let the viewers know what you have to say concerning any of the story. I still have Rachel Tazi with me in the studio. Thanks so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's continue with the paper analysis, looking at the Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Daily Sun newspaper, article hits Tinubu hard, says current APC government worsening poverty, warns president supporters not to disrupt tribunal proceedings. Economy already bad before his coming, says man, NACCIMA and others. You can find the details on page 6. 14 died, 9 injured in Lagos auto crash. Plateau governor imposes curfew as gunmen kill 9, raise 6 houses in community. Tinubu emerges new ECOWAS chairman, harps on regional security. World Bank loan threatens $500 million investment of local meter manufacturers. You can find the details on page 22. Ohaneze governor OT item people mourn Iroko. You can find the details on page 28. Anglican primate urge support for federal government economic reforms. You can find the details on page 6. We have a picture story from the left to right showing President of African Development Bank Group Akinwumi Adesina, Governor of Lagos State Babajide Sanwo-Olu, and Chairman JJ Power PLC Femi Atedola after their discussion on developing Lagos State public and private partnership power transmission project, the first in Nigeria, at the Lagos House Marina recently. And that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
And on the Punch newspaper, starting with the cost of living, more Nigerians may join Japa train as hardship worsen. Subsidy removal, rising inflation, threatening livelihood, 9 million pushed into poverty. You can find more on page 2. And it's quite a sad one. We can see more countries are banning Nigerians from coming into their country. That actually sends a signal that we have to do something about our own economy, because we can't keep moving to other countries for school. We can't keep moving to other countries for health. We can't keep moving to other countries even for shopping. We saw just last year when Dubai banned Nigerians for coming, and a lot of business people were stranded because they didn't really have a way of doing things there. We have gold here in the country, but we just lack that way to utilize all of the resources we have. So I think this is a signal that we have to do something about our country. Because what happens when most countries keep banning us from coming into their country? What are we going to do? Are we going to leave our own economy to be the way it is, talking about our health, our education, and a lot of things that are not working well, even looking at the cost of living right now. We saw in the other paper, I can't remember the paper we took today, when we're talking about cutting the cost of governance, and we're having where the Senate President, House of Reps, and aides looking at some of the people they have that are actually serving them. When we are looking at cutting down the cost of leadership, of governance, and we're seeing more aides, some of them maybe are useful, maybe not really useful, But then we just have to do something about this. Let's keep thinking about the common man. With all of these policies that are being put in place, some of them cannot really stand it. A lot of Nigerians are starving. People have to trek to work sometimes. We've seen that things are really not working when inflation rate is going up by the day. So we hope something will be done about this, because personally, if you ask me, Rachel, I do not think JAPA is the right way forward, because how sure are you that when you get there, there's actually something for you to do? We've heard of Nigerians that go outside the country and are stranded because they don't have anything. Some of them are actually sleeping on the streets, and then they are being deported back into the country.
A lot have lost their lives, Sally. A lot. We don't just know that a lot have lost their life. And just as you said, like, JAPA can never be the way forward. And I'm sorry for cutting you short.
It's okay.
And then a lot of things that we don't understand is probably because we have a country that I'm sorry to say that I'm proudly Nigerian, but then we are backward in a lot of ways. And we are dealing with countries that even when it comes to migration, immigration, and all of that, they have a lot of policy. And it's just a matter of time. Also, places like Canada that are widely accepting Nigerians will also stop accepting it. Why? It's because this country have advanced in a lot of ways. And we heard when the UK envoy said that it's not only Nigerians that are being banned, but Nigerians just happen to be part of the countries that are not being allowed into the country at the moment because of the reasons they have. And a lot of times these countries accept people based on their GDP and how many people they need, and they are watching and they are counting. By the time that they have reached their limit, they won't exceed it because of you. They won't exceed it because your economy is not doing well. They won't exceed it because you are desperate. By the time the number of immigrants that they need into the country, the workforce they need, by the time they start reaching their limit, of course they won't come out pop and clear and be like, we have reached our limit, but rather they will come with measures such as a ban on traveling and all of that. Because if you remember clearly, for the UK is more about dependents going for those studying, and they realize that, you know what, we've reached our limit for how much dependents keep coming along with the actual students, and we are no longer going to need more of that kind of numbers of people trooping in just as dependent. So we create a ban. And it's the same thing, in as much as other countries need us, by the time that they are beginning to reach their limit of how much people they need, how much resources, foreign resource they need when it comes to human resource, and foreign aid when it comes to work and all of that, they will begin to put a limit, and some of the limit is banning coming and all of that. So we might find that strange here because we don't even know what are the policies in our country concerning and foreigners migrating and all of that, because we obviously don't have them that much since we are the ones running out of the country. So yes, these are some of the results we will see over time, because the more that we are going out there, yes, these people might need us, but it will get to the time that, you know what, we no longer need this much people trooping in. And I want to believe that this ban might not just be on Nigerians alone, but on other countries also. We just happen to be one among the many other countries that are probably being banned from going to this particular country. So yes, JAPA is not the way forward. It just shows that a lot is wrong in our country, and I believe it's a wake-up call, and we will keep talking about it, Sally.
Of course we will. Yes. You know, just like someone said that when you JAPA to another country, you JAPA that and come back to Nigeria. Back. So I hope that it will, just like we all said, that it will serve as a wake-up call for us to do the right thing. Let's look at other stories still on the Punch newspaper. And we have Tinubu emerges ECOWAS chairman rallies members against coups. You can find more of the story inside the paper. The big story, which is on ministerial appointment. National Assembly await nominees as Tinubu send lists to the DSS and EFCC and others, with the rider head of service reshuffles secretariats ahead of ministers' arrival, orders Tuesday resumption. Permanent Secretary Rice Bajabia Mila Akume and Security Chief orders on redeployment. You can find more of that story on page 2. Coming from the presidency, I worked against Atiku, says Fayoshe. You can find that story on page 20. Adamu, National Working Committee members on coalition calls over the APC account audit. And we have coming NDLEA arrest Delta Church workers, sees drugs in states. You can find that story on page 4 and 5. And also on the paper, we have federal government to shut online banks pestering debtors. You can find more of that story on page 21. We've heard that over and over about all these online bankers that will send message to loved ones and say, if you do not pay me my money after a particular day or particular month, I will harass you. I think the government had kept making, you know, emphasis on banning some of this, and I'm happy because we've seen a lot of people falling victims to these online, you know, debt bankers. And I hope this will serve as a lesson to us to stop always going to these online banks, because some of them are not really reliable at the long run. So I hope that this will be a wake-up call for those who always like collecting loan from all these online banks, that they might not be reliable at the end of the day.
I think a lot of people don't measure the risks when it comes to borrowing from loan sharks, because their interest rate is always outrageous, and I think that's where a lot of people get hooked. It's not with what you collected, but the profit that these loan sharks are planning on making from you. That's what becomes outrageous, and that's where I know a lot of people that might have family friends that their pictures have been sent to me, and it is very embarrassing for them and even for you, because you wonder, how did it get to this point? So I just hope that people weigh the risks, and you should really be sure that you can be able to pay the interest from, because these people are out for massive interest. So when we talk about the CBN increasing their interest rate, these people's interest rate is on another level. So before you go there, you should weigh your risks, and don't even go there at all if possible.
Yeah, Richard, just from the name loan sharks, you know that sharks will open wide and swallow. So we have to be careful. Let's look at a few other stories to round up the paper. We have 18 Benin Republic bomb. Party goers, drivers and motor boy die in Lagos crash. It's a sad one. You can find detail inside the paper. Immigration officers shoot protester dead in Ogun community. You can find more of that story on page 4 and 5 as well. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, porous borders, Nigerian manufacturers struggling with unfair competition from Asian markets. Statement coming from CPPE. The writer flowing the story, faults VAT collection on informal sector. New executive order have allayed manufacturers' fears. A statement coming from MAN. NDLEA arrests church officials, others in drug raid. The big story on the paper, 12 killed in fresh Plateau attack. Governor imposes curfew on Mangu local government area. 16 die, 8 injured in Lagos Badagry highway accident. MTN Group leadership meets Tinubu pledges support for rapid growth of digital economy. Security agent comb forest for kidnap Ekiti APC chairman. You can find the details on page 25. Or your PDP leaders meet Makinde 6 stake in commissioner's nomination. Some local government chairmen to miss out on return tickets. You can find the details on page 23. Still on Nigerian Tribune, Tinubu emerges new ECOWAS chairman. And at the downside of paper, court orders Obasanjo Yar'Adua Jonathan Buhari government to account for $5 billion Abacha loot. Yari knew why we invited him. A statement coming from the DSS denies raid on ICPC CCB. No files implicating Tinubu in our possession. A statement coming from ICPC. You can find the details on page 27. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
And on the Vanguard newspaper, curfew as 12 killed in fresh attack on Plateau communities. You can find detail inside the paper. And we have on the PIA, administrative challenges, inadequate funding, and others hinder implementation. This is coming from an investigation. And coming from Benue State, death toll in Ukum local government attack hit 30. Governor Ali APC condemns the bloodbath. You can find more of that story on page 6. The big story for the Vanguard newspaper, government of ex-president must account for the $5 billion Abacha loot, with the writer saying Federal High Court orders administrations of ex-president Obasanjo, Yar'Adua, Jonathan Buhari to account for the funds, and then Serap urges Tinubu to obey the court order. You can find more of the story on page 5. Lobby for Juicy Committee intensifies in Senate. You can find that story on page 8. Buhari not in exile congratulates Tinubu for emerging ECOWAS chairman. This is coming from Buhari's aide. 200% hike in tuition fee will lead to massive student dropout. This is coming from the NAAT. You can find that story on page 13, and we hope something will be done about that. A lot of federal universities are beginning to increase, the tuition fee, and I think that is what all this is all about. So we hope something will be done concerning all of the stories we are seeing. Maybe that was why the president was introducing the student loan. But then just before that loan will finally come to be, because I think it's from September, it's going to start, and September is just about 2 months from now. But we just hope that these schools will actually have a rethink, because this will really mean that a lot of students will be, out of school. So something should be done so that we don't increase to the number of out-of-school children already we have, because we are among the first 3 countries in the whole world with the number of out-of-school children. So you know what that means for us. So we hope something will be done to prioritize education, because where we have education, you know that every other thing will fall in place, because education is the heart of any developed country. So we hope something will be done about this hike of tuition fee in our universities.
I'm saying for decades, this feels like the way of Nigerian government, giving with one hand and collecting with the other hand, because we are seeing that even federal government schools and universities are going to increase their tuition, and then you're wondering, the government is giving loans and then tuition fees are going high. So the loan you're paying for a tuition fee that is going high by the government itself from a loan collected by the government, and then you are going to pay the government in the future. And then this have been the pattern for many years in this country. The same way we can talk about wage increase. Minimum wage keeps being increased, worker payments are being reviewed and all of that, but then what do we keep facing in the country? Inflation. So when the government is giving you with this hand, they're collecting with this hand, because the real thing that is the problem in the society is not being faced, which is inflation. So while the government is increasing our salaries, for example, the inflation is eating it at the other side, which is something that the government is supposed to tackle. So in as much as the loan, we've talked about it many times, Sally, in as much as it looks like a welcome idea, when you see it deeply, I keep saying what Nigerian student needs are grants, Sally, not loan, because we are having the government increasing the tuition fees in their school, and then we are having the government giving loans, and then we are having the same government, you have to pay back this loan, and then you just wonder, are we truly, is the government truly putting things in place to help the masses in this country? Because it doesn't feel like help in any way. It just feels like giving with another hands and collecting with another hands. It doesn't feel like absolute help. It doesn't feel like the problem that the masses have been faced is being solved. It doesn't feel like that. So I just really hope that we will see helpful solutions and measures being taken by the government concerning education in the country.
It just took my mind back to when we saw even talking about pharmaceutical drugs.
Yes.
That from 60%, the increase right now is 150%.
Yes.
And I actually witnessed that this weekend, because I went to get, I think, cough syrup for a loved one, and then it shocked me, Rachel. The cough syrup back then that was like about 350 is now 500 naira. And then that is the cheapest. So we're talking about from 500 upward if you really want to get better. So imagine someone that don't even have food to eat, not to talk about even going for this pharmaceutical drug. A lot of people are saying they will resort back to the herbal drugs, but then some of these herbal drugs have their own side effects. So I hope that the government will actually consider the common man in all of this policies that they are setting up at the long run. Well, let's look at other stories still on the Vanguard newspaper. We have banks in earning windfall under the high interest rate regime, with the rider earning from lending up to 46% to 1.4 trillion naira, raises faster than loan portfolio. Loan book up by 18.7%. Experts see danger of high NPL ahead. You can see more inside the paper. And on misconduct, PSC demotes CP to DCP, reduces rank of 8 others. You can find more of that story on page 9 And we also have other smaller stories for sport and other columns, so you can do well to grab the Vanguard and read detailed stories of interest to you.
On the Abuja Inquirer, French embassy denies Nigerian teen prodigy visa. Foreign Ministry waits in. You can find the details on the front page and continue on page 3. And the big story on the paper, Trademore Estate FCTA residents battle rages. No estate on Airport Road has land title. Still on the paper, coming from NCAA, Airpeace marks Air top list of cancelled flights. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 3. And that's all the news on the Abuja Inquirer.
All right, let me round it up with the Nature newspaper for today. And on Nature News, we have Niger State rice farmers implement early planting to mitigate the flood risks. You can find more of that story on the front page and on page 5. And on subsidy, petrol consumption drops from 66.9 million liters to 48.43 million liters in June. This is a report coming from the NMDPRA. And then on the Eco Bridge reopens after extensive rehabilitation. You can find more of that on page 5. Poultry feed prices soar, raises concern for Kano State farmers. I think this is for all those who are into poultry, those poultry farmers, that the price of feed is actually high. The big story for Nature News say acute hunger. World Health Organization raises concern amid climate crisis. Other stories on the paper, we have Lagos resident protests persist, power outrage demand urgent action from the EKEDC. Kaduna State AFAN launches fertilizer distribution to support 4,600 farmers. And we also have superfood for memory boosts, which is on Nature Health. You can find more of that story on page 15. We also have a column for sport down on page 21. So you can do well, grab the Nature News and read detail of story that is of interest to you. And that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thanks so much, Rachel, for doing this with me. And thank you so much to all our viewers. Thank you to our supporters, the crew members, our producer, the general manager, and the airport executive. Until we come here again tomorrow, do have a blessed day ahead.